Welcome to Birth Stories in Color, a podcast creating community for people of color to share and learn from birth stories of all types. We're your hosts, Laurel Gurrier
and Danielle Jackson.
Hello, everyone. Today's episode features Cheyenne Varner, who is a doula, designer, photographer, and writer located in the Richmond, Virginia area. We first learned about Cheyenne through her online shop, The Educated Birth, which provides educational materials for birth workers to help in preparing the families they support. The great thing about the materials is that they do represent the diverse families within our community. We are extremely excited for her next venture of The Educated Birth. But before we get into that, hello, Cheyenne, and welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. As you guys were setting up, I put chapstick on even though no one's going to see my face.
We do that too, so it's fine.
Can you start by telling a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Cheyenne. I grew up in New Jersey. I was born in California, actually. Grew up in New Jersey. Went to college in Richmond, Virginia, and have stuck around here ever since. I have a nonprofit background. I spent my 4 years at the University of Richmond studying an interesting course of study that I created myself. That was called Educational Activism in the Arts.
Oh, wow.
Really interested in learning how to use the arts as an educational tool to make people aware of important issues, which, funnily enough, is exactly what I do with The Educated Birth and the magazine. So at that time, I studied modern-day slavery and human trafficking and how people could use art as a tool to make others aware of those things.
Yeah.
Then I worked in a nonprofit that worked in sort of the inner city community in Richmond for 3 years after I graduated. And then I learned about doula work, and a lot of things came really full circle for me in that. And that's where I've landed.
That's awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit about your doula work and the organization you work with?
Yes. So I'm self-employed. After I left the nonprofit world, I went fully self-employed as a doula and a graphic designer and photographer and writer. When you work for yourself, sometimes you got to wear lots of hats.
Yes.
But as a doula, I have my own business, but I also partner with an organization, a collective called the Richmond Doula Project. Which was inspired by the New York Doula Project, which some folks in Richmond had attended the Decolonizing Birth Conference that gets put on by Ancient Song Doula Services, and they had learned about a collective of folks that were dedicated to centering people of color and LGBTQ folks in birth work and providing affordable services to the community. And so folks had gone out there and learned about that and brought that back to Richmond. And as that was all sort of beginning, I got wind of it and became a part of that collective as well. So,
got it. I wanted to hit back on you saying like things coming full circle for you. I always love to hear how people got into doula work or birth work in general. And I was talking to my sister a while ago about how like it's okay for things to shift for you. I mean, I was a psych major and I do special ed, but now I do also doula work, but they're all connected. And so it's just great to hear how like your course of study, things that you were interested in, and how it's now all coming full circle. And so it doesn't always have to be this like, I'm going to do this, this is how it's going to work out. It's okay if it shifts a little bit, and it is all connected. I don't know if that's just me sharing a random thought, but I just always love to hear how people got to birth work and why they were drawn to it.
Yeah, and something that I tell people often, so I'm the oldest of four children in my family, and my mom, like when she was pregnant with my first sister, I'm like 7 years older So I was reading all her pregnancy books and baby books and really just into knowing all of the things. And for a while, because I was so interested in her pregnancy with my sister and my brother later, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, maybe this is why I'm so curious about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got to college, I was not interested in going into medicine. I just didn't feel like it was the field that fit me exactly. But that like sort of magnitude of curiosity surrounding pregnancy and everything, at that point I thought, well, maybe that's just because I'll be a mom one day and that's where that is. And I just this morning was thinking, and I was like, well, maybe it was because I'm supposed to be on this part, you know,
Right.
like I'm not a mother myself at this time. Like, I'd love to be a mother in the future, but I had always just assumed that, you know, that curiosity meant like its purpose was my personal motherhood.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like, well, maybe its purpose was this, you know, work that I'm doing that pours into this birth community, even if I'm not personally experiencing it right now.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Can you tell us about the mission and focus of the Educated Birth and how you began that work?
Yeah, so the Educated Birth began when I became a doula, and started, you know, I'm a very visual learner, very hands-on learner too. And so I wanted to implement those kinds of materials into my work with my clients. And I couldn't really find that many materials to begin with.
Yeah.
But then obviously as a woman of color myself, I wanted to see things that reflected me and my mom and my sister and my aunts and the people that are in my community and that I knew I wanted to work with. And I really couldn't find that. So the Educated Birth began at the start a way to create those materials that showed people of color. And then as I learned more and more about inequities in the birth world, that expanded to be like people of color generally and people who are approaching birth from different gender identities and just different life experiences
Right.
of various kinds.
Got it. That's awesome. Can you describe how Everyday Birth magazine then came from that?
Yeah, so the Educated Birth is really geared toward birth workers and saying, okay, these are educational pieces that you can bring into your business and use with your clients so that they're prepared for the birth that they're choosing. The Everyday Birth magazine was born more out of a desire to just touch parents one-on-one, like just more so for parents themselves, like things on your mind,
Right.
your stories, your concerns, and your communities, your communities generally. And that happened when I was in my own OBGYN's office, looking at magazines and being like,
Yep.
I'm not happy. But yeah, I was like dealing with some of my own health stuff, and I was very frustrated with how I felt unheard and not taken seriously and patronized in my experience, and sitting in that waiting room thinking about specifically pregnant people waiting to see a doctor. And I just wanted something there that would be affirming to someone, and
right.
that would also be empowering to, have pieces in it that say like, yeah, you can ask your doctor these things, and
Right.
you should, and they should answer. And so that's where Everyday Birth magazine came from.
Okay.
Cool.
Great.
When will you release the magazine, and how can the community gain access?
Yeah. Okay. So Everyday Birth magazine, there's everydaybirth.com.
Okay.
And that's where it will be. You can also get to it from theeducatedbirth.com. But that's, its space. And there are pieces that have been coming out over the past few months on the blog at everydaybirth.com. the vision is really that this would be something that is always going on, right? We're always having these conversations,
Right.
and telling our stories. But the print magazine, the print and digital magazine for the spring and summer issue will release on the 15th of April. So just not very long from today.
Yes. And congrats on that.
Yes. It's like birthing a baby.
No, yeah, definitely.
And I guess like a 6-7 month journey, maybe a little bit longer since it was just an idea. And there have been, I don't have my contributor list, but over a dozen people who have given of their time and skills. And I'm just so grateful to each and every one of them, because what makes this also really beautiful to me is that the educated birth is something that I just did. I just do. I sit in my living room and in my bedroom and I make things. But the magazine is not something that could exist on my own efforts. Those other voices and input have made it into what it is. So
I'm excited.
Other
than the release of the magazine, are there other things the community can expect from the educated birth?
So yes, of course. From the educated birth, I think a couple of the things that I am, looking at as I look forward, I want more language inclusivity. So I'm working on that right now. I have some Spanish translation of materials that have come out. I have someone working on French. And I've had people reach out to me about Italian and some other things. And so I also, I pay my translators. I'm like, I don't expect this work to be just volunteer done. So it's going to take some time for those things to happen.
Right.
Making sure that I'm compensating folks for their time and skills. So that's one thing, more languages. I'm always like, on the lookout for feedback from folks who use the educated birth materials to see, what would be helpful. And so I'm sure there are going to be some more things there. With the magazine, this first issue has really been, it's a pilot. And so it's going out there, and I'm going to also be having my ear to the ground to hear what people liked, what people didn't like, what people want to see more of. I really see more stories being more heavily involved in future issues. So I'm looking forward to, out of this first issue, a community sort of forming that can help connect me to folks who have stories that they want to share. But it should be a place where people talk about food and pregnancy and birth, and culture and pregnancy and birth, and understanding insurance was like a big, and money is a big thing for me. I want to put things out there that are very practical and hands-on, and like, this is where you can go to access X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Let's just take the mystery out so that folks aren't missing things that they could have had access to if only the system were not so convoluted.
Right.
It becomes a maze and like a treasure chest, like find the X. Like, no, like it should just be available somewhere.
Yes. Oh, I love the idea behind your work, the mission of your work, the inclusivity of your work is so wonderful. And I know, like, when I even started first looking for things to use with my clients, I'm like, I do not have any bone in my body to graphically design anything. So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to like make this work. And not even just like, having the pictures, but also the language within your work is just really helpful, because it makes it easy for me to share with families and them to understand. And even things like, in reading some of your blogs that I didn't even think about. And as I'm going into my own birth, thinking about those things. So just the overall concept of your work is really wonderful. And I'm so glad that it's expanding and you're finding support to get that out, and that people are going to have access to it now. So
Right. I used some of your materials just last week with a client going through like a mini childbirth and not just having information about what mom is going through during a labor, but also having a side about what baby is going through.
Right.
I don't think you really find that as often.
No, not at all. Not at all. So then, like when we're telling clients, well, the reason we want you to get in this position is because we want to do this for the baby. And they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, you guys are working together.
Yeah.
But again, like there's not a lot of conversation around the fact that your baby is also is a part of the process of growing within your womb, but also coming, to the world. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. I think, language and just how all of those things are framed is so important and takes a lot of refining. I've found like it has been a process since I started, and there was one point last year where I went through all my materials and I redid language to make sure everything was really gender inclusive too. And just knowing that like for folks who have different pronouns and things like of that nature, like for folks who have pronouns that are like what people generally expect, they tend to like not notice if the materials are really inclusive, in language. But folks who have a pronoun that might not be what someone expects of them, that's going to really speak to them. And that's something that I learned as I did, this work and then was able to bring in. And so even just hearing you talking about the baby perspective as you use materials, like no one has really brought that up to me before. So that's here because now it's something that I can have a mind for as I move forward. And so, I think this year is a lot of refining of things. And it'll always be that way. Right. Whatever kind of work anyone does, we're always refining our work to make it, more polished and better.
Right. So you've talked about this a little bit, but just how can someone find out more information about The Educated Birth or the Birth Magazine or get in contact with you?
Instagram is a great spot to find out more. I'm very active on Instagram. And then the websites, theeducatedbirth.com and everydaybirth.com. And you can contact me through any of those channels. I have contact forms online, and you can always DM me on Instagram. I'm very comfortable at this point.
Perfect. Well, is there anything else you want to share with listeners, resources, advice, anything that you think is important to leave with?
There are a couple things. So one other thing that I'm actually remembering that I'm trying to do this year, I want to do The Educated Birth, like a gift program. I want to make donations from The Educated Birth to, like midwives of color who are pursuing their,
oh wow, yeah,
their education, or groups that are. I really want to like donate materials, licenses for some digital materials to groups that are forming, that are doula, community doula groups and things of that nature. So I want to spread the word about that. There will be like information and forms coming up on the Educated Birth website, and I'll post about it on Instagram within the next month or so. So that's something that I wanted to say. I'm really excited to see things going on in the birth world right now. There's a lot more attention being given to inequities in birth, even just, in articles generally with Serena Williams' experience and her talking out on that. And then NPR did like a big thing with Politico or something like that about how Black parents die in childbirth. And I've seen 2 Kickstarter campaigns recently, one about pregnant people who are dealing with addiction and what that looks like. And another one that is talking specifically about just trauma in birth, generally that happens between parents and providers, and what it has looked like to fight for justice for those things. So I just want to, say that because, there are folks who might be interested in jumping on Kickstarter and seeing if they can support those documentaries. And I see fundraising campaigns popping up all the time for different groups that are doing really good work. And I think, we have to make it happen, right? A lot of incentive and the sort of higher levels of power, unfortunately, to put a lot of investment into this kind of work. And so, I think we have to be the stewards of that. So,
well, thank you so much for your work, and thank you for sharing your work with us, and also for being on the show today. Thanks for listening to Birth Stories in Color. To hear this show and other episodes, go to lgdoula.com.